Hey guys, Shelby Smith with Jiminy Crickets. Today I'm telling you how I grew my cricket sales by 217% in 1 year. It's wild to say, like wild to think about, and it's no wonder this year got stressful at times. So I actually have notes for this video so that I don't forget anything or screw up any numbers, because that would be counterproductive. But like I said, the big banner headline number is that I grew my cricket sales by 217% in 2021. Completely wild, but I think that there are 3 things that helped me get there, that really helped me to expand my sales. 3 things that I think I can narrow it down to. But before I get to those 3 things, I do want to give you a little bit of context of where things were at coming out of 2020 and how, 2020 pretty much sucked for me, just like it sucked for everyone. So let's take a small trip down memory lane to 2020 and talk about the context surrounding it. Obviously, COVID hit in early March. At that point, I had a full event calendar planned. Farmers markets, other live events, things like that. I was looking forward to 2020 being a gigantic growth year for me and my brand. You may not know, but late 2019, early 2020 is when I started bringing on my first contract growers. So for me, that meant finally I was going to end up with more crickets to work with, meant I could go after different kinds of sales opportunities. So let's say things like grocery stores, things like beefing up my online presence, more larger events. All of those things were supposed to be new possibilities that came with 2020. I had new growers, they were on board, they had already started growing crickets, like I said, late 2019, early 2020. I brought my first 3 on before the pandemic really kicked in. So I'm gonna refer to my notes again, excuse me. Once 2020, the real meat of 2020, once March hit, all of my live events completely canceled. All of them. All of them paused, at least for the very beginning. Nothing had really pivoted to online, and or anything that pivoted to online, I was just kind of in a wait and see mode of whether it was really worth it or not for me to go through the work to put things online. Second thing, basically all grocery stores and all other stores froze new product purchases. So I would say for probably until about June, most all stores completely froze any new product. The buyers were completely and totally scrambling to keep empty shelves filled with things that they already had. They wanted nothing to do with new products, particularly something like cricket. It was really unclear at that point as to whether there would be in-person shopping at all. It was just a really hard time on the wholesale side, especially until about June when things sort of started to open up, but really not. The other thing, any new store I was on the shelves of, absolutely no in-store demos, no sampling, no anything like that. So as a new product, new brand, typically when you go into a store, especially like a chain store, the way that you go from shelf to cart is you do demos. Very common, huge. It's one of the biggest tools in the toolkit for a new brand going into grocery. Totally gone in 2020. The other thing, all of my speaking events, in-person speaking events, completely canceled. So I speak to a lot of clubs, a lot of schools, a lot of all sorts of different groups. They come for tours, I go to them. Generally speaking, it's a great way for me to have a captive audience for an extended amount of time, to educate them on why in the world they would want to eat crickets. I also get to get a few crickets in mouths as we typically do samples at things like that. Those completely wiped clean. So what did that mean for me in 2020? That meant I brought on growers. So I essentially 4x'd, so 4 times my supply chain. I had 4 times more crickets than I had ever had in my business, while only doubling my 2019 sales. So it was a big ouch. Don't get me wrong, super thankful that even in 2020, with all of the things that happened, I was still able to double my revenues from 2019. Should not be complaining about that. I'm not complaining about that. But the rub was I 4x'd my supply chain. So that made for a very, very painful 2020. Needless to say, I could not have another year like 2020 in 2021. I wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation if my 2021 had gone similar to my 2020. I also, at the end of 2020, really hoped that 2021 was going to completely go back to normal. We were going to be done with this. Well, we did return more to normal, I suppose. Live events and all that did come back. It was definitely not a normal year. So here's fingers crossed for 2022. Now that you have the context of what 2020 really looked like for me and my business, let's talk about what worked in 2021 so that I can grow my sales by 217% in 12 months. Absolutely ridiculous. So there's really three things I think that led to my success or set me up for the success to grow my sales by 217% in 2021. First thing is the return of live events. Live events are huge for me. Customer interaction, person-to-person interaction, conversation, education, all of those things, super duper important to selling Cricuts. It is not like I am selling chips and salsa, where it's something that somebody has already tried, something somebody's familiar with, something someone's not afraid of. All of those things are what Cricuts are. People are afraid of them. It's something weird. It's something people have tons of questions about. So person-to-person customer interaction in a live setting, super duper important for my business. So return of live events was absolutely huge. You might be asking yourself, how huge? 34% of my gross sales in 2021 were made up of live event sales. It was gigantic. It was over a third of my sales. If I went back and looked at my 2020 breakdown, I would estimate that it was somewhere between 10 and 15%. So while some events did end up coming back later in the year, majority of the really big ones around the holiday times were all canceled like a week before we were supposed to have them. Totally sucked. But, so like I said, in perspective, it was live events in 2021 made up 34% of my gross sales as opposed to 2020. It was a much smaller percentage. Again, to kind of put it in perspective, my online sales in 2021 accounted for 28% of my total gross revenue, whereas in 2020, online sales made up 44%. So it was pretty big. Second thing that really allowed and helped and set me up to be able to double my sales plus some in 2021 was I hired my first 2 employees. For the longest time, minus the growers, that helps me scale my business in a different way, but the rest of the stuff, I have been a one-woman show for the majority of the time. So picking up 2 part-time employees was like transformative for my business. So I have 1 employee that helps me more on the farming side, on some different marketing things, on some admin things, on stamping all of the boxes and the bags and branding things like that. So she helps me on that side for the most part. And then I had another part-time employee that helped me in the processing facility. So she helped me actually make the end product. So both of those ended up, helping me build some inventory so I didn't feel like I was constantly scrambling, although by the end of this year I was constantly scrambling. Whoops. It'll be easier to plan for next year, hopefully. But so it allowed me to have some inventory built up so I wasn't constantly worried about that. And then the other thing is it freed up some extra time. So I wasn't having to spend my time sticking on labels or stamping boxes or doing all of those little things for the brand that I think are definitely important and help with brand awareness and just the overall experience for the customer that needed to be done, but it freed me up to do more salesy things, more pursuit of larger wholesale accounts, more just all of the things that I definitely had to do that I could not delegate out yet. It was a big step for me. I'm a little bit of a control freak, and by a little bit I mean a lot. So relinquishing anything at all was difficult. I am looking forward to expanding that delegation in 2022. So hold me to that. Third, and possibly the most important thing, although the other two obviously were very important, I set goals, which seems like basic. Why didn't you do that before? It's a really good question, but I just didn't. So what I ended up doing for the month of December, where I was supposed to have an event every single weekend, end of November, early December, those tend to be really good Christmas markets. Everybody's in a gift giving season. Those all got canceled a week before they were supposed to start. Freed up a whole bunch of time. I had already started reading a bunch of books and doing a bunch of things, and so I started reading a bunch of make it your best year ever kind of books, of planning, of trying to get myself focused for 2021. Like I said, I could not have another year like 2020, and I knew that whatever I did in 2020, I could not do in 2021. 2021 had to be done differently if I expected a different outcome. So I read a whole bunch of these books, and one through line was like, set goals, keep track of those goals on a regular basis. Make sure that they are within your control. So I didn't set goals like, I don't know. I didn't set goals like I want 10,000 Instagram followers by June, because I can't control whether or not that person pushes the follow button on my Instagram. What I can do is maybe I would set a goal like I want to have one Instagram post per day, and that's my growth strategy. So I set goals, and then I checked in on them. So I literally have in my calendar at 8 a.m. every Friday morning a review goals reminder set for 15 minutes. I have a spreadsheet that I constructed with my goals in it, and every single Friday religiously, unless I was driving and then I had to move it either forward or backward, but every single Friday religiously I checked in on my goals, checked in on the progress. It made me think about what I was doing, and every action I was taking, was it helping me move the ball forward on the goals that I had identified as important. So the other thing that I did was I wrote them out and I posted them in multiple locations. So this is actually the original that I wrote out in Sharpie. I have one next to my bathroom mirror. I have one next to the light switches in my processing facility. So I saw it all the time. Anybody who came into my processing facility and looked at the lights saw it. And then the other thing I did is I made the goals public, which seemed fairly scary, but it was just one of those things that helped me keep accountable. It's not necessarily like anybody asked me how my goals were going, other than somebody who was in my processing facility pointed them out and said, so how is this going? And that was only a couple weeks ago, so that was cool. But so all of those things and checking in on the goals I think was super important. It's something that I'm definitely going to do again for 2022, and quite frankly a lot of the goals are going to look quite similar, but I'm doing that process as we speak. So I am filming this is December 29th, so we're not technically completely done with the year, but I do know that my gross revenues are probably not going to grow gigantically in the next 2 days. Not something where it's going to be a major percentage up or down, so it's safe to say that I have grown my gross sales by 217% this year. I will be doing a whole video talking about my goals. I will lay out all of the goals that I had, and I will tell you exactly what percentage of completion I had of each of those, because I did not hit all of them, but it was pretty close. And I think at the end of the day, the important point was for me to set the goals and not necessarily for me to hit the goals. Obviously, hitting the goals is always what you want to do, but sitting down, writing them out, setting my focus, setting my intention for the year was incredibly helpful, and it's something that I will be doing again next year. To recap the things that really made me successful this year, number one was obviously live events coming back. So looking forward to getting back into some more live events in 2022 to really see Hopefully, like I said, fingers crossed, things are really back to normal by summer of next year so we can get some awesome live events up and going. Number 2 was hiring employees. Oh man, it was absolutely critical. It was terrifying, but it was the best thing that I could have done. And number 3, I set goals and I kept track of them and I checked in on them. So I will be spending the next 48 hours writing out my goals for the next one. But like I said, I will end up doing a video where I talk about how I ended up, what my 2021 goals were, and how I ended up at the end of the year. What was my percentage of completion for my 2021 goals? It was a really exciting year. There was a lot of growth. There was a lot of stress and growing pains that went with it, but I am really looking forward to what 2022 has to bring, hoping it's another year of big growth. Thanks so much for watching. If this brought you any value or you enjoyed it, please consider thumbs up, like it, comment, subscribe to my channel, and I'll be back to you shortly with a 2021 goals recap video. Thanks for being here, guys.